Using humor in sales outreach, techniques to try. Why humor is becoming a B2B outreach advantage. Most B2B inboxes are packed with serious, look-alike messages that sound like they were approved by a committee. When every cold email and LinkedIn note reads the same, a small, well-placed laugh becomes a pattern interrupt that earns attention without resorting to clickbait. That matters because 43% of people open emails primarily based on the subject line, so tone and novelty can decide whether your message gets a chance at all. The demand for humor is real, not hypothetical. In a global survey, 69% of people said they'd open brand emails more often if subject lines were funnier, but only 24% of business leaders say they use humor in email marketing. That gap is exactly where modern outbound teams can win, especially when buyers are tired, skeptical, and moving fast. At SalesHive, we treat humor as a practical lever for standing out in cold email, agency-style volume, while still feeling human and relevant. It doesn't replace targeting, positioning, or a clear call to action. It simply helps the right prospects actually read what you wrote. Done correctly, humor can make your outreach more memorable, more approachable, and easier to respond to. Why humor works with serious buyers. Yes, even in enterprise. B2B buyers are still people, and the research reflects that. When B2B buyers find an ad funny, studies show a 28% increase in brand connection and a 20% increase in brand affinity. Two outcomes that matter when sales cycles are long and vendor comparisons blur together. In practical terms, humor helps prospects remember you long enough to consider you. Humor also correlates with stronger engagement behaviors. LinkedIn analysis has shown humorous creative can drive 65% higher engagement and 42% more form fills than non-humorous creative, which ultimately creates more hand raisers for SDR follow-up. And when decision makers say they're more likely to explore brands using creativity like humor or storytelling, with roughly 4 in 10 willing to recommend them, it signals that professional doesn't have to mean boring. The key is that the humor has to feel like an inside joke about the buyer's world. Tech debt, endless approvals, QBR slide decks, pipeline hygiene, rather than a generic meme. If someone outside the industry laughs harder than your ICP would, you're probably not specific enough. Humor works fastest when it signals, "We get what your day actually looks like." The 3R framework: relevance, respect, and restraint. If you want humor that improves pipeline instead of creating risk, you need guardrails. We recommend a simple 3R framework. Be relevant to the buyer's reality. Be respectful of the person and their context, and be restrained so the value prop stays the main message. Think of humor like seasoning, enough to change the flavor, not enough to replace the meal. Relevance means the joke is anchored to a real buyer insight, not a random pun you'd use on anyone. Respect means you're never punching down at the prospect, their company, or their decisions. The safest targets are shared enemies, broken processes, clunky tools, corporate bureaucracy, or light self-deprecation as the salesperson. Restraint means one humorous element per touch, subject line, opener, or PS, so prospects remember what you do, not just what you joked about. Operationally, this is where good sales outsourcing and enablement makes a difference. Whether you run an in-house SDR team or an outsourced sales team through an SDR agency, write a one-page humor style guide before you let reps experiment at scale. Define what's allowed, what's off-limits, politics, personal traits, sensitive events, anything that could be screenshot-worthy for the wrong reasons, and require early drafts to be reviewed until you have proven winners. Where to add humor across email, calls, and LinkedIn. In outbound, the best place for humor is usually the place with the lowest downside and the highest leverage. For cold email, that's the subject line and first sentence, because they determine whether your message gets read at all. For B2B cold calling, it's a quick pattern interrupt in the opener that disarms without derailing. For LinkedIn outreach services, it's a short, contextual nod that proves you did your homework. What makes humor feel natural is context, not cleverness. A wry reference to spreadsheet gymnastics for a RevOps leader, a gentle joke about steering committees for a VP, or a self-aware line acknowledging another SDR in your inbox can work because it matches the prospect's lived reality. The moment you feel like you're writing a punchline instead of clarifying a business problem, you're over-optimizing the wrong thing. If you run a cold calling agency motion or manage cold calling services internally, equip reps with 1 or 2 safe opener variants and let them choose based on the room. If you manage a high-volume cold email agency program, keep humor tightly linked to the offer so it doesn't feel like a gimmick. The goal is always the same. Earn an extra 10 seconds of attention, then use it to be useful. Humor isn't the message, it's the moment that makes the message feel human enough to read. Best practices that keep humor effective and on brand start with light and specific, not big and funny. A subject line can be playful without being confusing, and the first sentence can be self-aware without being a comedy bit. Because 43% of opens hinge on the subject line, small improvements there compound quickly across a sequence, especially when your list-building services are feeding consistent volume. Personalization is the safety rail that prevents humor from feeling random. A quick, witty nod to a prospect's recent LinkedIn post, a funding announcement, or a tool stack change reads as empathy, not a gimmick, because it's anchored in something real. This is also where AI can help. At SalesHive, we use our AI-powered eMod personalization engine to pull in specific context at scale, and then we layer in light humor that matches the prospect's world rather than forcing a generic template. Treat every humorous element as testable copy, not a vibe. Many teams see meaningful lifts when they experiment, including reports of about a 30% increase in engagement from humorous subject line tests versus straight alternatives. The practical standard is simple. Keep the core value prop razor sharp, add one humorous touch, and only scale what proves it can outperform a control. Common mistakes that make humor backfire and how to fix them. The most common failure is generic or forced jokes that aren't tied to the buyer's world. Random memes and dad joke energy can cheapen your brand, especially with senior decision makers who are scanning for competence. The fix is to anchor every humorous line in a shared reality: approvals, reporting, tool sprawl, compliance reviews, so the tone signals expertise and empathy instead of desperation. The second mistake is punching down. If your joke implies the prospect is incompetent or their current approach is stupid, you'll trigger defensiveness and end the conversation before it starts. Aim humor at systems and situations, not the person. Broken workflows, clunky tools, absurd bureaucracy, or even your own role as yet another sales rep are safer targets that invite a response rather than resistance. The third mistake is ignoring cultural and industry context, which is especially risky in regulated markets. What plays well for a SaaS operator may land poorly with finance, healthcare, or global teams where humor norms differ, so you should dial the style by segment. If you support multiple verticals through a B2B sales agency model or sales development agency, set distinct tone guidelines by persona and geography, and build approval workflows for sensitive industries. How to measure humor like a revenue lever, not a creative experiment. Humor is only good if it moves numbers, and the easiest way to prove that is controlled A/B testing. Most cold email campaigns sit around 1 to 8.5% reply rates, while highly targeted and personalized programs can reach 40 to 50%, which means targeting and relevance create the baseline, and humor can amplify a strong foundation. If your ICP is sloppy or your offer is unclear, jokes don't save it. They just make irrelevant outreach more annoying. Your test should isolate one variable at a time: a humorous subject line versus a straight subject line, or a playful opener versus a neutral opener, with everything else kept constant. Track opens, replies, positive replies, meetings booked, and downstream outcomes like opportunity creation and time to opportunity. When humor is working, it should improve the funnel, not just generate ha-ha replies that never convert. In our own outbound programs, SalesHive has seen humor increase open rates by 18 to 34%, boost meeting booking rates by 22%, and improve deal velocity by 15% when paired with tight targeting and thoughtful personalization. That's why we position humor as an optimization layer inside a disciplined outbound sales agency system, not as a replacement for strategy, data, or relevance. If you want the wins without the risk, measure relentlessly and build a library of what actually performs, rolling humor out safely across your SDR team. The fastest safe rollout is a small pilot on a high-fit segment. Take one proven sequence, add a single humorous element, usually the subject line, and test it on 50 to 100 contacts before you touch your full database. If you operate B2B sales outsourcing or manage an outsourced sales team, the same rule applies. Prove it in a controlled slice, document what worked, and then scale with consistency. Next, operationalize what wins. Build a shared humor snippets library inside your playbook or CRM, and taglines by persona and industry so reps aren't inventing jokes under pressure. This is particularly helpful when you hire SDRs quickly, rotate territories, or run multiple SDR agencies, because it keeps tone consistent while still giving reps room to personalize. Finally, connect humor to your broader outbound motion so it supports, not distracts, from revenue. Whether you're evaluating a cold calling company, expanding your cold calling team, or comparing best cold calling services, look for partners who can combine testing discipline with message quality, because humor is only a multiplier for good fundamentals. When you treat it like a measurable tactic, you can add personality to outreach this week and still keep your brand sharp, credible, and scalable.